And here we're on the tip of about 7 million acres of this large watershed known as the Owyhee that drains a large desertous area and then dumps out into the Snake River. And that's what the group that I'm with, and Catalin, who's on the call, our communications manager, and our executive director, Tim Davis, and a lot of supporters and volunteers really care about and steward this entire area. And part of that stewardship is our enthusiasm about the sky and looking up at night. So I also teach, or you could say I moonlight at the Treasure Valley Community College here in Ontario, where I teach geology. That's actually my main scientific background. I have a master's in geology from University of Oregon. And I love taking students on field trips out into the Owyhee. And during my winter astronomy class, I love getting outside and doing stargazing. I find that today, a lot of folks that come into my class, or maybe even a lot of you, we have this, you know, a great perspective of the night sky, and maybe some, you know, some experience looking at the stars in awe and appreciating the natural night sky. Maybe, you know, some of you might know constellations. If you're coming to an introduction to stargazing class, you might be kind of on the edge there. But I find a lot of my students and a lot of people out there, really, we've lost some of these skills, I would say, like finding the North Star, or looking like we are tonight at the constellation Scorpius, which is a really main summer constellation in the Northern Hemisphere. So I take the approach in my college astronomy class that about half of it is this hands-on, right? Hands-on the sky astronomy approach, doing a lot of stargazing. And that is how this class, this class presentation was birthed. So here's a couple things we're gonna hit tonight. We are gonna talk about some basic stuff to have a good time during stargazing, whether that's in the winter or the summer. I mean, hey, we're out at night here. It could get chilly. Even in the summer, you can get dew, right, during the early evening. So we're going to talk about setting your awareness and things like this, so you have a good stargazing experience, even if it's your first time or 50th, using your naked eyes or a telescope, right? Then the importance of natural night skies is a little bit of discussion that we're having here in southeastern Oregon, kind of over to central Oregon, around just how dark it is out here. We live in a very, very dark, almost sanctuary-like area of beautiful night skies. So I want to touch on that a little bit. And then we'll get into the meat of the presentation, do a little bit of recap from the last few months. And I want to teach you a couple of new things built on those previous presentations. So a lot of you, it looks like, are new. So the previous presentations are all on our Friends of the Owyhee YouTube page. Just like this, actually, I'm in kind of a new space, but I've used the college classroom before to do this. Gosh, I think maybe even a park once, but you know, I've moved around venues a few times in different classrooms. And every month we decide to do this stargazing wherever we're coming from, whatever the skies look like, to keep up with this monthly thought pattern around the night sky. So check out those other YouTube videos for previous information. You'll see some repeat here at the beginning, but just fast forward past that and you can get to this meat here at the end. What I call the meat then is we're going to choose an area of the night sky to look at. Sometimes that's in the north, sometimes that's in the south, and then we change directions. This week we're going to be, or this month we're going to be in the south, looking at the zodiacal constellations, or the zodiac. So some gear that can be handy. You know what? Pause. I need to, not physical, actual pause, but I should say that we would like to record this meeting, since I just mentioned the YouTube recordings. And if you feel uncomfortable with that at all, it's just the screen share that's recorded. But this session is being recorded or can be recorded for future use. So, boy, sure glad I said that. Well, thanks, folks. So make sure to dress appropriately when you're going outside to stargaze. If it's cold, dress warm. If it's a little bit warm, make sure you still have a blanket or a couple of extra layers with you as the sun goes down and the earth starts losing that radiative heat. There's a curve to that. The earth is going to lose less and less radiant heat through the night as the cold atmosphere and the cold vacuum of space steals the heat away from the earth. It will get colder through the evening. So case in point, last week I was at Thunder Egg Days in Oregon, in Nissa, Oregon, and my daughter and I stayed to watch this movie late at night. And it was hot all day. We were out there in 100-degree weather. And here we are at night waiting for the movie and setting up the screen. And we were in shorts and tank tops, and it started to get chilly. You know, luckily we did have a blanket in the car, but that could have ruined, and it almost did ruin the beginning of our movie experience. So same thing with stargazing, is just think about the conditions that you're going to be in for a couple of hours and make yourself comfortable. That can be a lawn chair, a blanket. Recommend some hot cocoa or something to sip on or something to snack on while you're out there. So you occupy the mind in between when you're doing sort of the actions, okay? And if you're going to use a light at all, which I would highly recommend taking some notes, I do to all of my college stargazing students, is take some notes during the process. That'll help you remember and recall all this stuff a little bit easier later. So use a red light or the red color on your Stellarium app when you're using any type of light. Avoid using your cell phone flashlight or looking at headlights that are going by or looking at street lamps, as all of that stuff ruins your night vision. So the red wavelength of light will help preserve your night vision so you can better see the stars through the night. Then, as I mentioned, an app. Yeah, I'm going to mention an app, but here's my other favorite, excuse the up close cameraing. My other favorite tool to use is totally analog, right? I can carry this in my backpack wherever I'm at. And it's always really handy. Not that I can't carry my phone in my backpack, but you know, the battery dies because I let it die all the time. So having an analog type of thing to use for stargazing can be handy. But as we all know, you know, our wonderful space phones are great at all these bells and whistles, and we can download apps. I would recommend the Stellarium app. It's open source. It does work on PC also, where it has a lot more power to it. So if you're going to use something also on your phone, I'd recommend Stellarium. They don't pay me to say that. But it has these cool functions where you can hold it up to the night sky and it can tell you everything that you want to know, and you can click on the stars. But what I find with my students, and you know, we all learn in a similar way, is that if we don't engage with it in real time or in some sort of analog time, then we in one ear and out the other. So in order to have a real authentic stargazing relationship with the stars, I would highly recommend that you do take notes, reflect on this stuff every now and then, maybe star journal or star log this stuff out, and then practice the basics often. Okay, so the idea here is for everything to be, you know, naturalist. Everything is to be enjoyable, informative, and fun. Then the next thing I would recommend for a good experience is space, knowing where you're at in space. So in the upper right-hand corner here is a just simple compass, like a mapping compass that you can, or a navigational compass that you can use to navigate on a map. And that is really handy for also using just to orient yourself if you're in a new place, stargazing, or, you know, stop alongside the road while you're driving across the country. Then always being aware of your space when you're going out stargazing can help the experience. You would think that the stars always look the same from wherever you're going to look at them at. But if you kind of have trouble orienting yourself and you're looking at the stars late, as all the stars have come out at night, it can be hard to orient yourself or to find those road marks. Then attuning yourself to what season you're in. Are you in the summer season and going to see summer constellations, or are you in the winter season and see winter constellations? Then sunset and moonrise, you know, or moonset, sunrise, all of these sorts of times about when the major lights in the sky come out, right? So the sun being the major light in the sky, if the day star is out in the sky, well, we can't see the night stars. So we have to wait till the day star goes down. We call that sunset, and then we can see the stars. That's one of my favorite times to stargaze, actually, is within a half an hour to an hour after the sun goes down, because all of the brightest stars in the night sky start to pop, start to come out. So the later that you go and the less light bleed that there is in the sky, the smaller stars are more visible. So the moon, I guess this is kind of a mixed bag. I'm a naked eye stargazer, so the moon doesn't really bother my stargazing too much, and in fact enhances it. But a brighter and brighter moon can, again, bleed out the night sky if you're trying to look at smaller constellations or smaller stars within constellations, or using your binoculars or a telescope. The more light gathering power your lenses have, the more the moon is going to be in effect. So I really enjoy stargazing during a full moon, because I can see all of those brightest of the night sky stars, as well as this beautiful Luna in the sky. Then the next thing I want to remind you of, perhaps, or teach you, is about the angular distance of your hands. So you can follow along there at home, of course, if you'd like, but if you extend your hand all the way away from you at arm's length away, all the way from your shoulder, the human anatomy is, we all have about these same ratios of our length of our fingers and our forearm and our humerus, that it all kind of turns out the same for all of us, within a small degree of error, that if you hold your hand at arm's distance away, and you make a fist, you don't have to clench it or anything, but just make a nice gentle fist, then that's about 10 degrees worth of arc. Okay. And arc, of course, being from horizon to horizon, 180 degrees, or all the way in a big circle would be 360 degrees. So you can actually try that out if you wanted to, and measure that out and see what your difference is. That's super nerdy. But for the night sky, this can be really handy. When you're giving directions to somebody and you're like, yeah, take a left at the sign that says Ontario, and then drive a block and take another left. Well, what is a block? Okay, the sign, or the Ontario sign, is kind of like a star, right? Like Marek for the Big Dipper. But then how do you say go a block in the night sky? Well, this is the equivalent of go a block, is go 10 degrees in whatever direction. So 10 degrees, 18 degrees, and about 1.5 degrees for your index finger. And again, that changes a little bit, right? I could squeeze my finger and make it skinnier or larger. And at arm's distance away, that can change it, but really, really small. Okay, that I elaborated on that too much, but I think it's really, really cool how you can literally get hands-on the night sky to help you internalize some of this stuff through kind of paper and experience. Okay, I'd also recommend, if you would like a hard copy resource of any sort, then this book, A Walk Through the Heavens. I like the approach that they have here. That's very much like find this star and go this number of degrees and to find this feature. I thought that they did really great kind of field trip like guides, and that's a lot of what I use in my class. So I'd recommend that book. So looking at a specific area in the sky when you're going outside while you're setting a process is important. What are you going to intentionally look at? So intentionally look where, intentionally look at what. Then prepare yourself as you're going out, just like looking, going through this presentation or thumbing through this book. Be prepared when you go out stargazing. So you expect what you're going to see, right? And then you see it and you confirm it, and then you bring that into your mind and you remember it. So some preparation, and then while you're out there, look, right? Look at all the things, do them over and over and over, practice, and then try to keep the focus on the set of things that you are intentionally looking at. The sky is big and beautiful, and I'm not saying you only need to look at one corner while you're doing this, but while we're doing this stargazing and getting to know something, then yeah, keeping a focus on a specific geographic or celestial area can be really handy to learn. And then learning 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things at a time, and then repeating those, right? Just like basketball or something, and doing basketball drills, is learning one thing and then repeating that, so you really get that almost muscle memory, right? So I'd like to also mention that none of this would really be possible if, well, I mean, it's slightly possible to stargaze from the middle of New York City. As you can see, the next slide over here already is showing all of this East Coast. Well, I mean, there's some of this on the West too, but this light pollution, this emanating, bleeding light throughout the night sky that's kind of like the day star. It prevents us from seeing any of the smaller lights that are out there in the night. So out here in the West, there are significant efforts to identify dark areas, as well as to set up agreements, perhaps, right? Agreements that are not law-abiding in any way, but agreements to use light that makes sense, and only maybe a certain amount of light that makes sense. As we've gotten better efficiency in light bulbs and better efficiency at being able to, engineer light so it's not shooting out into space, but instead is shining down on the ground, we can use all of these things together to preserve our heritage of the natural dark night skies, which I think is really, really amazing. So that's where this network, the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network, comes in. And as friends of the Owyhee, naturalist and excited folks about outdoor recreation and conservation and stewardship of a landscape, that's where we come into stargazing here. Is we are part of this network, and this presentation and our collaborating libraries are also a part of promoting this network for the preservation of the resource, right? This is part of our human heritage, for one, to be able to look up at the night sky and to share these constellations that are all thousands of years old, from the Greco-Roman perspective, as well as many other cultures. All other cultures around the world have shared a similar heritage of looking at the night sky. So in part, we'd like to preserve that idea of our Owyehean heritage out here of looking at the night sky. And then there's also that travel industries can be interested in this, right? Actually, it's Travel Southern Oregon that really coordinates a lot of the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network. Because, going to a place, if you live here in the East Coast and you don't see a lot of stars, then being attracted to somewhere like Great Basin National Monument in Nevada, or the Owyhee Wilderness here in Idaho, or maybe one day Oregon, that these areas can be attractive to folks just that want to feel that and see that human heritage, right? To see a natural dark night sky. So, yeah, I said a lot of the things that are bullets on these next couple of slides, but we're lucky to have these resources out here, and we want to keep these resources. So let's have lighting that makes sense. Here's a few examples of that. Let's also start to define what dark sky preserves perhaps might look like, that have, as I said, no legal standing, but are agreements that we're going to do, what's right for preserving this resource, which is, really a lot based around light. We are also promoting at a lot of the public libraries these dark night sky kits that have some educational material in them. But one of the really cool, important pieces, and you can see one down in the lower right-hand corner there, are these sky meters. So you can kind of, well, it's in the bag, I realize, but you can see the meter on the picture right there and in the paper, but that this is super easy to use. And the information, or, these data that are collected, are extremely important information about the darkness of the night sky. So if you live in this region, or if you're visiting this region, you can check out one of these kits from the Ontario Community Library. And I believe Harney County Library also has a couple of these kits available. for, as I said, education, as well as literally collecting data from the night sky. And the instructions are in here, but they're really easy to use. Hold a button, beep, beep, beep. You get a reading, write these readings down. And, you know, of course, you take lots of readings because in the best science, we have a really high N or sample number. So taking lots of readings to average out. And then just like this map that's over here that shows burns right there in the center, we will really get better control over how dark the distal areas are and just how much the light pollution from some of these smaller cities affects the area, which probably isn't very much, but we'd like to really know while discussing the dark sky preserves. Okay. All right. A little bit of recap. We started a lot of these by going through, or we started these presentations in February, going to look at the winter circle. You know what? I'm going to pause for a second and minimize this because I just want to look at all of you. Okay. I just want to look and make sure that nobody's flagging me. Okay. There's the YouTube link. Okay. Just wanted to check because you never know when someone's like, hey, your audio's been off for 15 minutes. But Michael, Lynn, you want everything going okay? Okay. Thank you so much. Good.
Can you hear me, Sammy?
Thank you so much. Good. I'll get back to that. Jeez. Bells and whistles, right? Okay, very good. So we, come on here. You can do it. Resume slideshow. It's asking me, right? Well, that turned out to be a mistake that I shouldn't have actually checked on you guys. Okay, February, we started by looking at Orion, the big constellation of the winter constellations there in the southern night sky. And just to note, even though this came up later, the ecliptic or the path of the sun passes right through these constellations, right up here at through Gemini, as we learned later in these presentations over there where the moon is at. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about the ecliptic and the zodiacal constellations now. But the reason I bring that up is tonight we are looking at essentially the 100% opposite of this place in the night sky. Okay, so just think about that, right? We are really 180 degrees away from February in our path around the sun. We're on the opposite side of that circle. So we are looking opposite direction that we were during nighttime, or looking away from the sun that we were in February. So I just think that's pretty special. We started by looking to the south towards, Betelgeuse, big bright red star out there in the night sky in the Milky Way. And now we're going to look in the same southern hemisphere towards a different reddish star in the middle of the Milky Way. Okay, so there's the winter circle constellations, some of the names of those stars, and we went around and named all of these and did the circle. Okay, just getting warmed up. Then in March, we turned 180 degrees in geographic space, and we looked to the north to start to look for the North Star, Big Dipper, which is an asterism, not a constellation. The constellation is Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. And then also the constellation Cassiopeia, or the Big W, or the Big M in the sky, depending on how that's rotating around in the night sky. At what time you're looking at it. So this was all kind of setting the stage for this overall view of 360 degrees around not just us in space, but around the year, how we get to see different things each month. So we turned around in April and started to look specifically at the ecliptic. And so looking in the south, we used again the winter circle as a jumping point to look at Gemini and Taurus, or the star Aldebaran, as part of the winter circle, a bright star, the eye of the bull. So Taurus and Gemini being in what we already think of as the zodiac, or if you've heard of, the birth month constellations, right? Oh, hey, what's your sign? That kind of stuff. That is the zodiac, and those are real things. They're real constellations in the night sky. And the reason that they're, special perhaps is that the sun actually travels through those, or actually they're the stars that are behind the sun as we see them. So the sun kind of travels through all these different constellations, and that path is called the ecliptic. So we looked along the ecliptic to see the constellations that we could see during that time, which started with Taurus, and then led all the way over to barely see Virgo coming up. If we waited until like 10 o'clock, which back in April was like 3 hours after the sun went down, right? We could start to see the star Spica in the Virgo constellation. And then over here in May, we shifted again and went to the north to look again at Big Dipper, the asterism, talk a little bit about the shape of the Big Bear, looking at the bear's ears. Then we honed in a little bit more to look at the other circumboreal constellations. So circumboreal, or circle Boreas, the North Pole, they're all, or the pole star, they're all circling the pole star. And there's about 7 of these circumboreal constellations, Cassiopeia and Big Dipper, or Ursa Major, being on opposite sides. But then there's the little bear that makes up the pole star right in the middle. And Cassiopeia, the vain queen, has a husband, Cepheus, that's shaped kind of like a house. And then there's Draco, there's Perseus, Andromeda, and others that are related, which we haven't hit all of those yet. But in May, we did hit some of those, like particularly Draco, looking at Draco wrapping around the North Star there. Then started to draw some attention to the northeast sky, where in the early summer, you can begin to see the swan, or Cygnus, start to come out of the northeast sky. The star's name, that's very bright, is Deneb. And the reason that's important to point out just as it's coming up is because this is a summer constellation that you can see arc through the sky all, when you can see the night sky all through the summer, and then it sets in the morning, nose into the sunset. So it's this beautiful swan-like, or goose-like shape moving across the night sky. And turns out Deneb is also an important night star in what we call the summer triangle. Let's see, I think I got off of some slides there, hopefully showing the right thing. And then in June, last month, feeling a little bit similarly. Here's me scratching my head at the beginning of the presentation because I had the wrong set of slides. So we actually just used Stellarium to go through some of new constellations in the south. Starting with Leo and Virgo, we used that to look up closer to the zenith to find the constellation Butes, or the herdsman. So we did a little bit in the south off of the ecliptic. Now just using the ecliptic as kind of the main highway at which we're looking at stars and constellations off of that. Okay, then we moved on to back to the northeast sky to look back at Deneb, but also the star that we had looked at maybe the month before, Vega, very bright star in the night sky, in the middle of the constellation Lyra, as well as the constellation Hercules above our heads. But we came back to a couple of those stars and plugged in the new star, Aquila, that's the bird or the eagle, to make up this summer triangle, which is the opposite of, you know, the winter circle that's now below the Earth or on the other side over here. So during the summer, we see these stars, Vega and Altair and Deneb all together as the summer triangle. It's pretty big in the night sky, about 15 degrees on either. It's an equilateral triangle, pretty close. Then the opposite being the winter circle, which is kind of more of an oval or a football shape. Okay, all right. Well, that catches us up then to this month, which what are we going to see? Oh, there goes my joke too. There's what we're going to see during the month of July is smoke. Okay, do want to be, you know, real about that for a minute, that it is now what we might consider here on the West Coast, wherever you might be joining us from, maybe you're also affected, that it seems like fire season or smoke season comes a little bit earlier every year. Fire season, here's some forest fires in California, a picture from last year, which the smoke season started a little bit later. It seems like we really got smoked out for a lot of September hikes and not as many August hikes. But we're in July now, folks, and it's already quite smoky. So I want to remind you to be safe wherever you're at, whether that's, you know, particularly safe from forest fires. If you live in a forested area, you know, always staying vigilant and not using open flame, as well, you know, for your own safety, for the forest safety, as well as, you know, making sure there's some types of buffer around the housing or your housing if you're out in open, flammable country, you know, keeping things watered if you have vegetation close to the house. So overall, that kind of safety and awareness, probably don't need to say that to you. If you're living in that area, you're like, well, I'm way aware. But also air quality, safety. I love to be out and hiking on the landscape during the summer months. And, you know, the heat doesn't bother me so much, but the smoke really does bother a lot of people, whether you're running in Olympic track, you know, pre-qualifiers over on the west side, or whether you are trying to hike here in this landscape or just walk to the grocery store. The air quality index is pretty poor right now in a lot of areas in the West. So just be careful, use precautions. You know, we all have face masks that are super handy. Smoke is, you know, really small particulates, but, you know, lessening the amount of particulates that are coming in can overall help the quality of your breath and lungs. So just wanted to be real for a second that tonight, every other month that I've presented, I've been able to say, tonight, when you go out stargazing, you're going to see. But, you know, really, unfortunately, that's not the case in a lot of areas in the West. It might be where you're joining us from, and I really hope that it is. That means that you're not feeling the effects of the forest fires or prairie fires as much as we might be. So, this is all then a better reason to use Stellarium, right? Again, the mobile app is useful, but all the slides that you see in which I've taken a screenshot and I've labeled all of these things, all this stuff comes from the desktop app of Stellarium. I find it really handy for teaching or for showing people, you know, turn left at Orion, stuff like that. So I guess that's a small little plug for tonight. If you aren't in an area where it's clear enough to see the stars tonight, then go ahead and download Stellarium. It's free. It's open source. It works on Linux. And it is really, really useful. It does have a lot of bells and whistles and things to play around with, just like a lot of other software does. So it might take a little bit to get used to, but there's a really, just like any open source software, there's a really great community and forums out there. Just a minute ago, I was like, gosh, how do I do the ecliptic line again? You'll see that in one of the slides here. How do I turn on the ecliptic line? So I, Googled the help guide resource. And of course, this, 39 gazillion page PDF. Well, it wasn't a gazillion pages. It was like 60. Help guide popped up that gave me, the guide that I needed to use Stellarium. So there's instructions out there, but really just playing around with it and seeing what it does can be a lot of fun. So I want to cover, let's see, we're about 6 minutes after the hour. So did a good amount of review, went through some of the basics of stargazing. And now, we have a good chunk for the meat to talk about finding the constellations or I guess finding and interacting with the constellations between Virgo all the way over to Sagittarius along the ecliptic. So we're covering a lot, but luckily we've talked a lot about Virgo in the past, of course. So tonight at about 10 p.m. Is where I'm using Stellarium. I've set that at about 10 p.m. So if you could see the night sky tonight in the Northern Hemisphere, this is about what you would see. Okay, or that is about what you would see. And did I do this right too? Okay. So first we have in the right dead south sticks out a lot. We'll kind of get there, but the familiar stars here would be Arcturus and Virgo. So presumably if we've been stargazing every month and looking at these, then those are the two that would have carried over from last month while we were looking at Stellarium. So recall, or if you just watched the YouTube video, that we used Leo, or the backwards question mark in the night sky, as sort of this space holder or yard, or what do you call it, road sign to see Leo and the tip of his tail, and then sort of about 20 degrees of open space before you get to this bright star, Spica, which is sort of meant to be a little sprig of wheat in the lower left hand of Virgo constellation. Virgo constellation is a really long constellation. Most of that 20 degrees of space between Leo, the tip of Leo's tail, and that star, because that's down here at her knees or thighs with the wheat, most of that space is the Virgo constellation, defined as Virgo constellation, even though there's only one bright star. Okay, so one thing, there's two things that I'm going to point out about that are relevant. One is that open space is really long. So remember, the ecliptic, or the sun, is traveling through these constellations. Not exactly through, I know, but the constellations are behind the sun in the night sky, and the sun is, traveling through these. And if Virgo is really, really long, then the sun actually spends a really long amount of time transiting through the constellation Virgo. Turns out it's about 45 days that it takes the sun to travel through Virgo. Now, if you've heard of the zodiac before and you think of, oh, I'm a Cancer, right, by your birth sign, that whole chart stuff, that whole chart business is all broken up in a big circle, and just like 360 degrees, it's easy to divide a circle into 12. Just like our year, 365 days, we've done a pretty good job of trying to evenly split those up into 12, plus or minus a few little days here and there, plus 366 days for a leap year. But so that's all, that circle is divided perfectly into 12, but that also means that they divided the slices of pie evenly. So if you look up your chart sign, right, it's going to say, oh, you're a Cancer if you were born between this date and this date, right? And I think that's June to July, right? We just got out of Cancer. And what I'm saying is that it's not an even 30-day split for each of these signs. The pie isn't, the sun doesn't spend the exact amount of time in all these constellations all the time. So for instance, the constellation Virgo that's really long, the sun spends about 45 days transiting through that constellation. So chances are, if you look at Stellarium and you punch in your birth date and you look at where the sun is on your birth date, it's not in the constellation sign of your birth, right? And through what's called astrology, right? In astronomy, the dates are offset, and we also have 13 constellations of the zodiac, not just 12, because it's not an even circle. So we'll get to that in just a minute too. But So that's the first thing, is that this open space, the sun spins a long time. Astrology's got it all wrong, right? Astronomy has the proper number of signs and so on and so forth. Now, the second thing I want to point out here is that when we started looking at the winter circle, very dense amount of stars, all those stars that make up the winter circle from Procyon to Aldebaran. And then we went through this kind of open, dry patch of sky all the way from Gemini to Leo, finally to Virgo. And there's this, Cancer is in there. It's really small and really faint. So that represents looking the Earth or the night sky, us. We are looking, if the Milky Way is a nice big disk like this, right? And we are traveling along this disk on the Milky Way. When we are looking into this long area of night sky like Virgo, we're actually looking that way. We're looking away from the disk of the Milky Way. Where when we're looking at, say, Orion or Scorpio, we're looking along this dense plane of stars. That's why we see so many of them. And, it turns out that we don't circle right along, in the way that the Earth is tilted and the way that the sun is even rotating around the galactic center in a slightly tilted manner, and all these small tilts that we actually get to see this really beautiful tilt to the Milky Way, where we see it as this long bar that goes through the night sky. But remember that goes underneath the Earth too. Okay, so that's the next thing I wanted to recognize, was when we're looking into dense star space or the Milky Way, we're looking along the Milky Way. But when we are looking in this open space out to the side, we're looking away from the Milky Way, whether that's, up or down. Okay, hopefully that's not too confusing. I don't think so. Okay, then we also talked about Bootes and Arcturus. But moving on from Virgo, okay, our tie point from last time, and moving towards this more dense space of night sky. This is actually the Milky Way. We'll look at that in a bit. But moving about 30 degrees, 25 to 30 degrees away from Arcturus along the horizon. Okay, it's not always that case, but it's a little bit of a tilt, but this is a good way to think of it, is between Spica along the horizon, about 30 degrees, we run into this really, I would describe it as orange star. It's not quite as red as Mars, the planet, and it's not quite as red as Betelgeuse, the big star that's in the middle of the winter circle. It's kind of a little orange. Well, it's a big star, bright and orangish. That star is the heart of the Scorpion, the heart of Scorpius constellation. Let's see if he's going to turn on. Ugh, dang. Slide transitions, not very good. But the information's all here, just not as fancy. So Antares, this orange star, the heart of the Scorpion, between Spica and Antares, we passed this nice little trio of stars that are kind of bluish, a bluish hue. And those are kind of like the claws or the pinchers of the Scorpion that are coming out there. The heart down here, it's kind of angled here, and the pinchers up there. And then on top of these pinchers, we went through this space of sky. And along that space of sky, I'll go back to this slide. There's 3 stars. They do make kind of this isosceles triangle with a long bar in the middle, short there. And that was interpreted then as the scales. Okay, so you have this center bar here. It's resting on the claws of the Scorpion. And then from side to side, that's the parallel bars or perpendicular bars holding out the scales. And then here's the neat part, is that below the bar, you get to these faint stars, or about stars of equal brightness, representing the balance, the actual plates there. And of course, looks like the ones closer to the horizon are a lot lower than the ones over here. So showing you that the scales are not always balanced, right? As we can read into that proverb. So that's the Libra constellation. The scales, Libra is one of the few constellations that's not represented by an animal or a mythical creature, but by an inanimate object. Scales, yes. So the scales of Libra time, or late September to October, the sun is out during this time, so we don't see Libra during the birth time of Libra, just like we don't see Scorpio during the birth time of Scorpio because the sun is out. Okay, so there's all the way from Virgo to Scorpius and Libra. To finish off Scorpius down here, there's kind of a hook to the tail. It's a big, long scorpion. And closer to the horizon, as the sun comes up, 11 o'clock, this curl will rise above the night sky. But this curl here leads up to Shaula, this kind of double star. If you look at it with binoculars, it's really easy to see that it's not a double star, right? But that it's this bright star, bluish star, right next to this smaller dim star. Almost look like little siblings. And that Shaula means stinger in Arabic. Many of these star names are Greco-Roman. They were Greek, and we've called them by Greek names for, during Greco-Roman time, that long transition, but also today. That's what the scientific community chose to use, because of the roots of European science. That's the, things that were accessible and written down, Ptolemy and others, and then used today. However, there were a few gaps in all of those records, right? Because post-Greco-Roman time, right, particularly the burning of the Library of Alexandria, that was a clearinghouse for all of these beautiful textual riches of knowledge throughout the Roman world. And when that, burned, the only remnants then were from scholars who had studied at the library and then taken pieces home. Well, it turns out, after the fall of Rome and the rise of the Arabic world, the rise of Arabic scholarly works, 800 BC and on, we see the Arabic world took on a lot of the Greco-Roman constellations and renamed some of them. And then a lot of today, what we have today, comes from the Arabic world's, holding on to what was there in the Greek world before some of those things burned and we lost those records. So we don't know what the Greeks called Shaula. Actually, that's part of why it's using the Arabic name instead of any pre-existing Greco-Roman name. So I just think that's pretty neat. It shows a slight amount of the multiculturalism of what is today here in the night sky, but also that astronomy is a worldwide endeavor, right? And it takes many thousands of people, millions of people all throughout history looking at the night sky to enjoy them in the way we do today. Hey, that's most of the ecliptic in this area, but I want to hone your attention to this little circle here. Okay, that thing looks like, if you squint your eyes a little bit, looks kind of like a teapot. Okay, here's a image of a teapot I thought looked similar. And I just put this in here for fun. This is a place that we have adopted, Sucker Creek State Natural Area, south of Ontario, about 40 miles, and beautiful open acreage of a state natural area, home of the Oregon State Rock, the Thunder Egg. And we just helped install some signs there and remove some graffiti, doing some picking up trash, awesome stewardship projects. But there is right here this really beautiful rock that our executive director's grandmother, as far as I know, invented the name to this thing. Whether that's true or not, I'll always remember it. But that's Teapot Rock. Okay, this isn't the greatest picture, but you can make out the the teapot back there, I hope. So there we go. There, we're tying back into the Owyhee at Teapot Rock. Well, there's a little teapot in the night sky there next to the stinger. Shaula means stinger of the scorpion. Okay. I also, now I'm looking at Antares and I'm realizing I didn't tell you what Antares means. And this is super cool. Kind of like, I think of it as antithesis. Antares is the opposite of Aries. Aries is, you know, the god of war is Mars, the star or planet Mars, Aries. And this is also a bloody looking star, apparently, a god of war, or a hungry, hungry scorpion. Anyway, Antares. So here's the little teapot. And let's go back to the sort of a zoomed in view of this teapot. Oh, that's not going to show up like I wanted it to. There. That is actually, here's the teapot from the base up through the arrows on the back. And that makes up, as you can see here, the bow and the torso of the centaur Sagittarius. Okay, Sagittarius was specifically, this is the legend, the Greco-Roman legend, was specifically put into the night sky to always aim at the scorpion, to always aim the bow at the heart of the scorpion so it can never go chase down Hercules, who is also in the night sky. And Hercules and the scorpion are mortal enemies. We can tell you the story later, or maybe over a campfire in the fall when it's not fire season. Okay, so Scorpio, or excuse me, Sagittarius has the bow that's always pointing towards the center of Scorpio. Now, here's another really, really neat thing, and something that wasn't known until, you know, way past Age of Enlightenment and scientific era, is that also the Sagittarius, as it aims towards the scorpion, the heart of the scorpion over here at Antares, it's also aiming really close to the galactic center. The galactic center, the center of the Milky Way, you guys. Again, if the Milky Way is a big disk like this, okay, then right at the center of this big accretionary disk of all this dust and gas, right there at the center, which most astronomers think, you know, theoretical physicists think that there's a massive black hole at the center of each galaxy, and that's what kind of keeps them doing what they're doing. You know, as they're moving around. But that galactic center, if we're way out here during the summertime, or excuse me, wintertime, we're looking away from the galactic center, looking at Orion. But if we're in the wintertime, we're looking into the galactic center when we look towards Scorpius and Sagittarius. I think that's super cool. It's super romantic and epic, if you ask me, to be outside on a summer night camping and looking at Scorpius and Sagittarius and thinking, well, I'm looking towards the galactic center, man. Okay, you don't have to say it like that, but that's just the voice that I tend to think of, I guess. But okay, this is a picture of the ecliptic in space. So kind of like I was just doing, there's the disk, all right, there's the sun in the middle. Here's the Earth going around. When we're looking out to the sun during the daytime, you know, we're looking towards the day star, but at night we're looking away. And the sun then during the, you know, opposite time of year would have passed through these constellations. Okay, you know, in front of the constellations. Well, here's all 12 of the constellations, but even this image, this Google image from a publisher, didn't publish the 13th that's in here. And I really want to show you the 13th constellation. So here we are with a zoom in of the ecliptic. And here's Scorpius and here's Sagittarius. What the heck? There's a leg in the middle of it. Whose leg is that? Whose leg is in the middle of the ecliptic? That is... if we zoom out now a little bit in Stellarium, that's the Serpent Bearer. Serpent Bearer, huge, big constellation that basically sits atop Scorpius, you know, danger zone, I would think. Sits atop Scorpius, really big open space, takes up a whole, I think it's 20 degrees, might be 18 degrees of the Milky Way. Big space of the Milky Way up here. The Serpent Bearer, and that the Ophiuchus or Ophiuchus is the 13th zodiacal constellation. So that is the 13th. Perhaps if you were born in October or November, I can't exactly remember the time there. It might even be late November, December. No, that can't be. It's after Scorpius. But anyway, it's not the nice divided time that astrology is. Perhaps you may have been born during Ophiuchus and you just didn't know it. So you might be, when somebody asks you your sign, you might be able to say, I'm the 13th sign of the zodiac. Okay. Well, I just want to take 1 second to remind of the process here that we're looking to the south. You can see this, the ecliptic during any season, but we're in summer right now. Sun setting at 9:30. The moon is about a quarter waxing, getting a little more full. Remember your hand signs the distance out there so you can remember how far it is from this star to that star. And our process today was using the ecliptic, the stars that we already knew, like Leo, perhaps, that was going down during sunset last month, Virgo and Arcturus, to find then the red star Antares and Scorpio, to look at the claws to find Libra, to look opposite Antares to find the teapot, Sagittarius, and then, of course, Ophiuchus is sitting atop the Scorpion. So that's all I have for you tonight, so going through the zodiacal constellations. And I'd love to see some questions in the chat. I'm going to minimize this thing so I can see the screen again. And I'm going to stop sharing because this rabbit hole thing looks really crazy. Okay. All right. Where I am in the southern hemisphere, it is midwinter, and Scorpius is directly overhead at night. Fascinating to see in your perspective. Right on, Fiona. Thanks for adding that. You must be, if Ophiuchus is directly, or excuse me, Scorpius is directly overhead, you must be closer to the equator in the southern hemisphere rather than closer to the pole. Close to Melbourne. Oh, I had that opposite. I had that the other way around. Yep. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really neat. So depending where you're at on the globe, if you're up here towards the North Pole, when you look up, you know, the North Star is circulating around, or that's the perspective from the north. And the further you go towards the equator, the higher the North Star is in the night sky, or excuse me, the lower the North Star is in the night sky. So you can actually estimate, if you know, knowing where the North Star is at, you can use your hand degrees to go from the horizon up to the North Star. If you measure that, that's your approximate latitude on Earth. So I'm about 43, 45 degrees if I measure from the horizon up. Kind of a handy trick. Very good. Are there any more? Would you like to ask any more? Add any questions, Michael? I know I was having trouble hearing you and really anybody else earlier. But if you have some comments, you can type them in the chat.
I don't know how to. Can you hear me now, Sammy?
So maybe if someone else can hear Michael, they could type it in the chat there. Michael, Sammy can't hear you. Yeah.
Hi, Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah.
If you have a question, you can tell me and I can type it in for Sammy.
Perfect. But I'm just really glad that you all were able to hear the presentation, see the slides.
Can you tell Sammy I take astronomy class with
Beth? Oh, I think I saw Beth leave. Thank you.
Can you tell Sammy I take astronomy class with a program called the Challenge Program?
challenge. Okay.
It's a program for
I'll look that up.
Who have
The challenge program.
A program for people like me who have disabilities.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. There's a lot of wonderful programming out there for stargazing. I have to say one of my absolute favorite is on PBS, or the public broadcasting station, available. And I think they're just called Stargazers. I can't remember their name, but the Astronomy Cast, which is a podcast that's Audible, they also have a YouTube channel, and they would do a broader amount of astronomy, but they have a leg also of more basic stargazing too. That's really cool. Challenge, yeah, I'll have to look that up. That sounds like a wonderful program for stargazing, and something that can offer regular classes like that or like this is really cool. Thanks for the heads up.
County, Maryland. I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland.
Way cool. All right. Well, if there's no other questions coming through in the chat, then I'll let y'all go with your evening. And I really do hope wherever you live that you can see the night sky tonight and go out and practice, even if the things are a little bit different depending on your latitude or location. But the smoke is a real barrier for us right now in the West. And I'm really saddened by that, not just for myself, to see the night sky, but really for, the situation here in the West and globally everywhere. But with that, have a very good evening, and I hope to see y'all here next time.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, Lynn. Thank you. And thanks, Michael. You're in Maryland, I see.
Rockville, Maryland.
Joan, thank you.